G'day, I'm Paul. That's the Volkswagen Amarok, and it is the oldest dual cab ute in this segment. It was released in 2010, so it is now well and truly getting on in age. Today we want to figure out whether it's worth still buying. This one here is the V6 diesel. It is literally the only V6 diesel left in this segment now that the Mercedes-Benz X-Class is dead and buried. Fun fact as well, the next generation of this car, which is due in a couple of years, is going to share a platform with the Ford Ranger. So they're going to team up. You can view more about that up here on our exclusive story. But in the interim, this is the Sportline, so it's one up from the base model, priced at $56,590, and it competes with cars like the Ford Ranger, Toyota HiLux, Mitsubishi Triton, but remember, this is the only V6, so it packs a bit more punch. Today we're going to do a detailed review, plus a little bit of off-roading as well. If you do want to skip ahead to other parts of this review, you can use the time codes up on the screen there, or if you're on YouTube, just scroll down, use the chapters below, and if you haven't done so already, subscribe, press the bell icon. It'll tell you every single time we drive a big blue ute. So despite being 10 years old, normally by this point cars look so dated and boring, I still think this looks fantastic. So you've got 8 colors to choose from, all but white and red randomly are an extra $700. And here with the V6, you can see the V6 models get this badge here, chrome highlights as well. And then you've got that color offset with this sort of, whatever shape that is, grille where the air can come through to the radiators.
Honeycomb.
That's right, honeycomb. And then the big, proudly worn Volkswagen badge. Now, headlights, you do get bi-xenon in some of the top spec models, but unfortunately here you have these nasty looking halogen lights and then also halogen daytime running lights plus fog lights down the bottom. And if we skip around to the side, we have 18-inch alloy wheels, a fairly chubby profile tyre there, another V6 badge here, so everyone knows you've got the proper stuff under the bonnet. It's actually not too overtly utey. And by that, I mean it doesn't have, yeah, it's got flared wheel arches, but it doesn't have the big plastic covers that you find on a lot of utes today. So I guess they've gone for more a car-like appearance here instead of, I guess, a tradie or off-road appearance for the Amarok. All right, jump around to the side. Now, the funny thing I've noticed here, whenever you're next to an Amarok or watching it from side on, it kind of slopes downwards. It sort of sits a little higher at the back, and it looks normal when you've got payload in there and it's sitting a little flatter, but kind of looks weird when it's running. So a lot of people do suspension modifications to lift the front to kind of just even it out a bit. Privacy glass here. Around the back here, V6 turbo diesel, in case you missed the 2 side badges, the front badge and this badge over here. And then you've also got 4Motion, which means this is a permanent all-wheel drive. Another big Volkswagen badge. Let's have a look inside this tray. Now this is interesting. We tested a D-Max recently and they've got the metal hinges, whereas this is just like a sort of steel rope type arrangement. Same sort of durability, but interesting to see that they use different setups. And you'll also notice in here, they've adopted that torsion beam that we find on the Ford Ranger as well, which means lifting that tray and then having it fall down is much easier. Now, in terms of dimensions in the back, it's slightly unique in this segment because you've got 1,555 mil of load length, 1,620 mil of load width, but importantly, 1,222 millimeters between the wheel arches, which means you can fit a Euro-sized pallet, which is kind of cool. Then you have a payload of 976 kilograms. Then you've got all these tie-down hooks in the tray, plus a 12-volt outlet as well. And if we close this, you've also got a, if the tow bar was there, a 3.5 ton towing capacity, but only a 300 kilogram downball weight provision. So we're inside the Amarok. What does the key look like? Well, it's not a proximity key, so it's just a standard key with lock, unlock, a key flips out, and then the Volkswagen symbol on the back, and then you have a key barrel that it goes into and that you have to turn for anything to happen. So what about styling? Okay, so you can see that this is 10 years old because this is kind of the styling that was modern 5 or 10 years ago. It was all about rough and tumble and durability. Utes have now evolved to go one step further than that. They've realized that they are lifestyle vehicles. So look, while it does look scratchy and quite sort of hard wearing, it still is presentable. And in terms of your touch points, stuff like that center console is nice. And then the doors are softly padded where your elbow is going to rest, and the steering wheel sits nicely in the hand as well. So from that point of view, it's all good. But how hard are these surfaces? Well, we have tested it with our gyrometer. So if you want to see how hard all the main touch points are compared to other cars in this segment, just scroll down to the description below where you'll find a link. Okay, finally, build quality. What's it like? Well, glove box is a little shaky there, but I've driven plenty of these over the years and never once had a complaint about build quality. They're generally pretty well put together. Okay, let's talk infotainment, 6.33 inches. Size does matter when it comes to infotainment because it is pretty difficult to see. It's such a small screen, but it has a few little features in it. I'll show you in a sec. So basically touch screen, it's all color as well. You can see you can swipe through those menus there. You get AM, FM radio, a CD player, which is pretty impressive these days. A lot of cars don't have CD players. In the media menu, that's where you can stream from your device if it's connected over Bluetooth. You've got the phone menu as well, which is again for Bluetooth, and voice recognition where you can give commands to the car for calling people or navigation through the phone. Now, the interesting thing is you've got an SD card slot there as well to look at images on here. They'd have to be zoomed in because you wouldn't be able to see too much. But the impressive part is actually the app interface. So if I click on app here, you see Apple CarPlay is integrated into that screen. It is a full screen implementation. Nice and smooth, works pretty fast. It is a cabled system. There's also Android Auto. I'll show you what that looks like. So again, a full screen implementation and all fairly easy to use as well. So you can click on the maps there and then drag around as required, nice and fast too. So very impressive that they've been able to integrate everything into that very small screen. There's a 6-speaker sound system, and in terms of connectivity, you have your Bluetooth, but you've got one USB point down here, which is going to be in use for your smartphone mirroring, an auxiliary outlet, a 12 volts, another 12 volts up the top, and then another 12 volt off to the side. Okay, let's talk safety. It's going to be a very short discussion because there isn't a great deal going on here. There's no autonomous emergency braking. There's no lane keeping assistant. There's really not a great deal, no blind spot monitoring. You do get front and rear parking sensors, and while there is airbag coverage at the front, there are 0 airbags for the second row, which is, again, pretty disappointing in a car like this. It's likely to be carrying kids and other people in the second row. You do get a reverse view camera. Let's see what that looks like. Okay, so that's pretty decent. You can see as my finger moves up there, it brings an extra context menu. You have rear and front parking sensors displayed there too. So it is a pretty decent setup if you're going to be doing a lot of tight parking. Moving on to practicality, and let's start with storage. Your phone, where's it going to live? You have stacks of room for a phone. There's no wireless phone charging, but there's plenty of places to keep it. What about your trusty bottle of water? Fits easily in there. Inside the door, you have stacks of storage, plus it's carpeted as well. Center console, reasonably sized. It's quite narrow, but that gives you an idea of how deep it is. It will fit a full-size bottle. Let's check this glove box. It's tiny. It looks big, but once you get the manual in there, there's really not much room for anything else. There's also this storage nook up the top for papers and parking fines, and then this for your Oakleys. And then in terms of comfort, you do get automatic dual zone climate control, and while the seats are cloth, they are extremely comfortable. They hug you in nicely and they're nice and soft, so for all body shapes they're going to be pretty good. The steering wheel is great because it has reach and tilt adjustment. Some utes in this segment still don't have reach adjustment. Sits nicely in the hand. It's car steering wheel, so it kind of feels like you're driving a car, not a dual cab ute, and all of this stuff's really easy to reach and full manual adjustment for all the seats as well. Before we properly look at the second row, I want to show you some of the features here. So the seats come up, which is good, and they've got a hook here so you can keep them up. It kind of gives you that flat load floor, but unlike some of the other utes in this segment, there's no under-seat storage there, which is a little bit disappointing. And the other thing that is truly bizarre, to access the top tether points, there's a tab here, but when I pull it, it does nothing. You need to have someone else, like a cameraman, Igor, if you can pull that tab at the same time, for it to drop. Now that's silly because if you're on your own, it's just not really possible to do it unless you climb onto the seat and grab both handles. But anyway, so back here you have your 3 top tether points and then jack storage just behind there. Now, what about comfort? So grab handles to get in. Oh man, this is cramped. So the Amarok is a wider ute, but it's not any better in terms of legroom. My knees are well and truly wedged into there with this in my regular driving position, which is quite far back, but toe room's good, but yeah, I'm like leaning up against a metal bar there, which is not great. I've got to kind of go side saddle to get this thing seated correctly. Headroom, pretty decent. In terms of other features you got here, cup holders are down here. You can pop those into position and then they fold down like that. You also have storage inside the door that you can fit your bottle into, also carpeted. Map pockets here. There's a 12 volt outlet, but no rear air vents. And remember, no airbags back here either, but you do get ISOFIX points to join those 3 top tether points. Okay, so we've hit the road in the Amarok, and powering the V6 version of the Amarok is a 3-litre turbocharged diesel, 165 kilowatts of power and 550 Newton meters of torque. But the key thing here is that it has overboost. So for 10 seconds, it can crank that up to 180 kilowatts of power. It's mated to an 8-speed automatic transmission, and unlike most of the utes in this segment, it's permanent 4-wheel drive, and that is a 60-40 torque split, rear to front. And that means that you are getting a predominantly rear-wheel drive feel, but on sketchy roads like gravel roads or perhaps wet surfaces, this is going to feel a whole lot more sure-footed than most other conventional 2-wheel drive utes in this segment. The all-wheel drive system uses a Torsen center differential, and then it's got a braking system on each wheel that acts as a traction control system effectively, and that should work well off-road. There's no settings and stuff really to play with here, and no low range either, which makes it slightly unique in this segment. So being a punchy V6 diesel, the official 0 to 100 time is 7.9 seconds. I want to see if we can match that. So I'm going to flick this down into sport mode, dial up the throttle a little bit and then just punch it. That is really impressive. It just punches you back in the seat. I don't know, it's so confidence inspiring knowing that you have so much torque under your foot. It doesn't feel wheezy like a 4-cylinder diesel does. Now the official fuel economy figure comes in at 9.1 litres per 100 Ks, and we are bang on that, which is pretty rare when we test a car to have something that actually meets the fuel economy claim. And that brings me to the display ahead of the driver there. So you've got your fuel economy figure, there's a trip computer, and then you've also got audio plus phone settings and also settings for the car as well. It's all monochrome though, so it's not very advanced. Now let's talk about the steering. So this still uses a hydraulically assisted steering rack. It doesn't use EPAS, which is what a lot of utes in this segment now use, which is an electrically assisted steering rack. So that means you can't get stuff like a lane keeping assistant or semi-autonomous parking. It's actually not too badly tuned. It has enough feel through it. It gives you that car-like feel behind the wheel, and it still has a bit of meat to it, but it isn't overly heavy, so it's just the right balance there for steering feel. Okay, let's talk about the ride. We've found a very crappy looking road here. It's actually doing a reasonably good job. It doesn't throw you around too much, and it's not like the HiLux, which needs weight in the rear for it to feel settled. This is just cruising over everything. It's not quite as comfortable as something like a sedan, but it is comfortable enough for a dual cab ute. In terms of engine noise, you do get a little bit coming into the cabin, but V6 diesels are generally nice and subdued. This engine is actually used in other Volkswagen products, so it is a highly refined engine to begin with, and it kind of just does the job here really nicely. In terms of visibility, I feel like we're sitting lower to the ground here than you do in some utes, so that means you're getting a nice visibility out on the road without feeling like you're sitting on top of all the traffic. Rearward visibility is good. Sideward visibility is fantastic because those wing mirrors are absolutely huge, so I don't feel too overcome or daunted by having to drive this. It doesn't feel like it's in the middle of everything in traffic. Okay, let's talk off-roading. So permanent all-wheel drive is actually pretty beneficial for off-roading. There's no real modes you have to worry about. There is one, and I'll explain that in a second. But in terms of the specs, approach angle of 28 degrees, that is the angle of the face you can approach before you hit the front of the car, and a departure angle of 23.6 degrees, that is the same but for the rear of the car. In terms of ground clearance, you've got 220 millimeters to work with, and a wading depth of 500 millimeters. So despite the fact it's a 10-year-old car, that is pretty impressive. So the only thing you have to worry about here, there is no low range. The 8-speed automatic has a very short first gear, and that's kind of its version of a low range, but there is an off-road mode and a rear differential lock. With the off-road mode, we'll click that on. It effectively changes the stability control, and it makes it so that you are able to get more slip in the wheels, and also when it comes to stopping, it changes the ABS profile so you can build up a layer in front of the wheels and stop the car quicker, and we'll demonstrate that in just a second. But here's log mount, and we'll give it a shot here without the rear differential lock. That is what I tend to do. See how it goes. All right, it is a little bit bumpy, but it's climbing up here without any stress at all. It's actually really impressive. So despite the fact it doesn't have a low range transmission, that first gear is kind of acting as a low range. That's really impressive. Very happy with that. All right, let's try our descent here. So the off-road mode also has a hill descent control, which activates when you switch it on. Let's see how much we're going to collect on the way down here. Yeah, I can kind of feel some of these rocks just clipping on the way through. So you are suffering a little bit there without that clearance, but for the most part it feels okay. I'm just catching one on the side step there. I can feel the hill descent control working here. I just literally hover my foot over the brake. It's actually a really steady and gradual decline down. This is really impressive. I mean, it just shows you don't need all the manual controls here to do basic off-roading. Okay, so we want to test this off-road mode out, especially the stopping potential, because in theory, when we stop without off-road mode, it should take ages to stop on gravel, and then with off-road mode on, it should stop a whole lot quicker. So what I'm going to do is crank the speed up here to about 60 k's an hour. I'm going to slam the brakes on right now. This is without off-road mode on. Yeah, predictably it takes forever to stop because the ABS system is locking, unlocking, locking, unlocking in rapid succession. It doesn't really have the ability to pull the car up. So let's try that again, this time with off-road mode on. Okay, so let's flick off-road mode back on. The little indicator comes on. Get this back up to 60, and then we'll hit the brakes. Oh, that is stopping much better. You can actually feel there's something pulling the car up a whole lot more. When the ABS is just in its normal mode, it kind of just runs away from you, whereas right there it felt very confident in the way that it stopped. There's also added stopping precision because of the four-wheel disc brakes instead of drums. Okay, final thing we want to check is 500 millimeters of wading depth. How well does it work? We've got our little river here. Let's go have a sticky beak. Okay, so I've got to admit our river crossing here is very low at the moment, but it'll give you an idea of what it looks like when this traverses a little bit of water like this, maybe on the way to a campsite or something. So 500 mil is pretty low compared to some of the other cars in this segment, but for what it is, this is going to get the job done. You can get a snorkel if you need to. That will improve your ability to do this type of stuff, but pretty good for a standard car. Okay, so Volkswagen Amarok, despite its age, it actually still represents great value for money, and it has one heck of a punchy diesel engine, especially useful if you're doing a lot of towing. Keep in mind, obviously though, 300 kilogram downbore weight limits your towing capacity to around 3,000 kilograms, despite the official rating of 3,500. Also missing a lot of safety technology, which in this day and age isn't very good. But if none of that bothers you, this really is a standout in this segment with full-time all-wheel drive and just a really nice driving experience. So let me know in the comments below, do you think we need more V6 diesel utes in Australia or in the world? I think that they are a really good addition and slightly better than the four-cylinder stuff that's out there on the market at the moment. So let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit like, share it. Also press subscribe and the bell icon if you haven't done so already. But until next time, take it easy.